Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Siddharth Mukherjee from Ambedkar University, Lucknow. Students, we are going to learn about a very important module, the title of which is Impact of Modernity on Gender, from the paper Comparative Politics, Politics of Advanced Industrial Societies. In the introductory part, I would mention three important points or three important aspects that we are going to discuss and analyze in our module. The first point is that the gender has emerged as a basis of social stratification and power politics in all modern societies. And this is a phenomena which is common to both developed and developing countries. Feminism is the ideological force behind women's movement in modern societies. Feminism is an ideology in itself. It basically talks about equality of gender. Feminism is also a movement claiming for gender equality and equal rights for women. Now let us try to look at the central themes of gender politics. Gender politics has the following important themes. The first is patriarchy. Patriarchy basically is a system of relationship in which there is male dominance. Males dominate in every sphere of public life, and women are discriminated. The second aspect that is closely linked with gender politics is equality. As I have just mentioned, the women's movement, particularly the liberal feminist movement that we are going to discuss later, basically makes vociferous claims for gender equality, particularly in political and economic spheres. The third important aspect that is central to gender politics is rights. And amongst different types of rights, the feminism became an important ideological force for claiming civil and political rights. During the early part of women's movement, the main claim was for political and civil rights. And the fourth aspect that is very important in gender politics is social movement. The movement led by women at different points of history is something that we need to understand in gender politics. Now, what are the objectives of this module? There are three major objectives. The first objective is that we're going to learn about the main concepts and ideas in gender politics. Some of the ideas have already been mentioned in the introductory part. What we are going to do is that I'm going to elaborate these concepts and ideas. The second important theme that we are going to discuss in this module are the different streams of feminist thought in modern societies. Related to the thought and philosophy, we are also going to see how movements claimed for different types of rights for women. The third important aspect of discussion would be certain important gender issues that are pertinent to women's movement in modern societies. Now we are going to discuss the various concepts and ideas that are linked with gender politics. The first concept that I would mention at the outset is the concept of biological determinism. Feminists argue that women face social disadvantage in view of their biological or natural difference from men. The common argument that is generally given to justify gender differentiation is that women are naturally or biologically different from that of men. Contrary to this argument, the feminists state that gender is not a natural or biological construct. Rather, it is a social construct. In other words, gender is something that has been created by the society and does not have any natural basis. The advocates of biological determinism basically try to justify biological differences by distinguishing between femininity on one hand and masculinity on the other. Masculinity is basically linked with certain qualities that men possess, and these qualities are considered to be superior than feminine qualities in the sense that these qualities are required for carrying out or undertaking responsibilities in the public domain. To mention some of these qualities, the qualities that men possess and are treated to be superior qualities are decision making, power, knowledge, rationality. Now, as we all know, these qualities are generally linked with the decisions being taken in the public domain. And whereas femininity or feminine qualities are irrationality, unintelligible, dependence, physical weakness, and emotionality. Now, these qualities clearly show that they are something which are not required, or I would say that are found to be unsuitable for carrying out a certain number of activities and functions in the public domain. So this distinction is clearly made between masculinity and femininity. And the hierarchical placement of these qualities is what justifies the activism of or active participation of men in the public domain and exclusion of women from the public domain. Now I would discuss about a very, very important concept linked with gender politics. A concept that has mostly been dealt by the radical feminists. And the concept that I'm going to discuss is the concept of patriarchy. Now, what is patriarchy or a patriarchal society? Patriarchy is a kind of gender relationship based on male supremacy. And a patriarchal society is a society where males dominate and women are discriminated and exploited. Patriarchal values are artificially created values, and they are found in all spheres of public life, as a result of which we find male dominance in all public spheres, including political, economic, and social. Patriarchy or a patriarchal society is one in which we find a clear-cut divide between the public and private domains. Women are active in the private domain, whereas male members are found to be active in the public sphere. And they are made to be active in the public sphere because of certain qualities or masculine qualities which are found to be suitable for public sphere. Women are found to be unsuitable for public sphere because of their inferior qualities. So this kind of an artificial divide is created between public and private in patriarchal societies. And this divide becomes a basis of division of functions between men and women. Male domination is something that is found in all public spheres, including politics and domestic sphere. So the male dominance or male supremacy begins from the family. In family, we find that there's a dominance of the eldest male. Similarly, in politics, we find that male dominate and women are excluded. Even if women are given positions in politics, they are voiceless. Most of the decisions in the political sphere are taken by male members, and women lack participation or decision making in the political domain. Same is true about the administrative sphere. Women are excluded or discriminated in this sphere as well. The male take the important decisions, while the women administrators or women officials are made to abide by the decisions taken by the male counterparts. Now we would discuss about the impact of modernity on gender in modern societies. Now, democratization as a process was carried forward by feminist struggles in modern Western societies. Democratization, as we know, is closely linked with modernization, and these two phenomena are also closely linked with the movements that were carried out by the feminists in claiming for civil and political rights, and later social and economic rights. In view of this, I would be discussing three important streams of feminist thought and their associated struggle. The three important streams of thought that we are going to talk about are: number one, liberal feminism; number two, socialist feminism; and finally, radical feminism. Now, let me first begin with liberal feminism, one of the most important and the foremost streams of feminist thought and movement. Liberal feminism draws its ideological force from the philosophy of liberal democracy, and this stream of feminist thought came to be established in United States and the countries of Western Europe. The major theme of liberal feminism was gender equality, as a result of which feminists in this particular stream primarily struggle to achieve legal equality, as a result of which they made strong claims for civil and political rights. So, liberal feminism primarily talks about civil and political rights. The two very important scholarly contributions in liberal feminism are: number one, Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of Rights of Women, a book that was published in the year 1792, and John Stuart Mill, who is also known as a very, very important and prominent political philosopher, wrote a book called On the Subjection of Women in 1869. These are two very important scholarly contributions in the field of liberal feminism. In fact, we could say that these two scholars are the forerunners of liberal feminism. Now, let me elaborate a little bit on the views of the two scholars of liberal feminism. Let me begin with the ideas of Mary Wollstonecraft and how she leads a movement based on these principles and ideas. Mary Wollstonecraft was highly inspired by the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity, the three fundamental principles of French Revolution. Inspired by these ideas, Mary Wollstonecraft made strong claims for equal opportunities in the field of education. Wollstonecraft strongly believed that education is very important for the empowerment of women, as she found that illiteracy was a major cause of ignorance in society. And it's because of illiteracy amongst women that they have not been able to claim for their rights and entitlements through centuries. Coming to John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill talked about extension of civil and political liberties to women. As we know that women struggle took a long time to get political rights in some of the advanced countries of Western Europe like UK, France, and Germany. John Stuart Mill was one of the first and foremost political philosophers to have demanded civil and political liberties for women. Another contemporary scholar of liberal feminism is Betty Friedan, who wrote a very popular book called Feminine Mystic, where she identified the constraints that inhibit women to pursue career opportunities and participation in political life, especially in United States. She finds that these constraints basically inhibit or prohibit women to get equal opportunities in the sphere of employment and in the sphere of politics. Even if they are given positions in these two spheres, they are discriminated and exploited by the male counterparts. Coming to the second very important stream of feminist thought, socialist feminism. Now, socialist feminism was first advocated by two very prominent and popular political philosophers, Karl Marx and Engels. The two scholars wrote a very famous text on social feminism entitled Origin of the Family, Private Property and the State. In this text, the scholar basically argued that capitalism or capitalist mode of production was the major source of oppression or exploitation of women in modern societies. So they linked gender inequalities or gender discrimination with capitalism. Engels believed that women became unpaid labor in bourgeois family. So women were free and they enjoyed liberty before the advent of property or private property. But with the emergence of private property, they faced discrimination in all spheres. And this discrimination began from the family, where they were denied of any kind of property rights. Modern capitalism was thus seen as a source of gender inequality. Students, now we are going to look at the contemporary socialist feminism. The contemporary social feminists primarily try to analyze gender division in modern societies. Like classical social feminists, they also believe that gender divisions primarily emerged from the capitalist mode of production. So capitalism becomes a source of gender inequality in modern societies. A manifestation of gender division is something that is found at the most basic level, that is family. Contemporary social feminists have analyzed that there is a division of labor in the families. Usually, the male members of the family are bread earners, whereas women are made to work at home and carry out domestic responsibilities. So, the social feminists find a clear-cut differentiation or division of functions in the family. They also view that there is an international division of labor. This phenomena is particularly observed by feminism or feminist scholars of international politics. The feminist scholars of international politics find that there is a clear-cut gendered division of labor in global politics. And this gendered division of labor is something which is common to all societies, both developed and developing. They observe that women are made to perform unskilled or semi-skilled professions that are normally low paid in the global capitalist market. The international scholars, the scholars of international feminism believe that women are deliberately made to perform unskilled or low-skilled jobs, whereas men, because of their masculine qualities which are considered to be superior, which are considered to be suitable for carrying out certain functions, becomes the basis of division of labor. Now, contemporary social feminists also find that women who are working outside face double burden, in the sense that they have to carry out responsibilities at home as well as the professions that they have undertaken. So they bear the double burden of family responsibilities and profession. Okay. An alternative to this gender division of labor, that a phenomena that is common to all kinds of societies, is nothing but a socialist revolution, a solution which is normally given by socialists or Marxists. Like socialists and Marxists, the social feminists also believe that the only way out or the only way of establishing a, a society based on gender equality is to have a social revolution, and only a social revolution can possibly end the gender inequalities in all societies. Now, let me discuss the third, a very contemporary stream of feminism, radical feminism. Radical feminism primarily represents the second wave of feminist movement. So I would say it's one of the recent phenomena. The major advocates of radical feminism are Simone de Beauvoir, Firestone, Eva Figs, and Germaine Greer. Radical feminists are critical of male bias in liberal and socialist feminism. They believe that gender requires a separate analysis, whereas the liberal and socialist feminism mix gender with other kinds of identity. Their basic attack was on socialist feminism, which tried to mix class with gender. Radical feminists argued that mixing class with gender ignores the discrimination that is based on gender by giving primacy to class cleavages. As a result of this observation, the radical feminists advocate an independent analysis of gender exploitation or gender discrimination in different societies. They argue that women face collective discrimination. Women, by virtue of their gender identity, face collective discrimination in all societies. They find that patriarchal values perpetuate in all spheres, including political, social, cultural, and even family. They envisage that personal is political. What we consider as a domestic or a personal sphere is, according to radical feminists, political because it involves power politics. The liberal scholars denied regulation of the family sphere because it was considered as personal sphere. But gender relationship in family based on power politics was considered to be political. So therefore, the family sphere did not remain as a personal sphere because the relationships were based on power. So family sphere, according to radical feminists, need to be regulated. They hold womanhood and femininity in high esteem. They believe, they attack, or they find that the differentiation, the artificial differentiation between masculinity and femininity is something which is problematic. This artificial differentiation in patriarchal societies is a source of exploitation and discrimination of women. They believe that women or femininity or quality of women are superior and must be held in high esteem. Now let me discuss or talk about women's representation. Women, right from the Industrial Revolution, have claimed for political rights. It took a long time for women to get political rights in Western countries. The claims for political rights, as mentioned earlier, was primarily inspired by the writings of two foremost liberal feminists, Mary Wollstonecraft and John Stuart Mill. Women's struggle for political representation, as I just mentioned, has been a long-drawn process in modern societies. The demand for political rights, however, required changes in civil laws, which were discriminatory. So granting political rights also required changes in civil laws or the nature of civil rights that discriminated against women. This mainly included the revision of marriage and family laws that excluded women from property rights in the family. So many feminist scholars, particularly the liberal feminist scholars, believe that women must get property rights and education which would empower them and would make them strong enough to claim for their political rights, equal opportunities for education and employment, and equal rights in the sphere of family and in matter of property rights would automatically lead to equality in the political sphere. Now let me give some data or some information about gendered patterns of representation or granting of political rights to women. Women, as I said, women had to wage a long struggle to get voting rights. And women have got voting rights in Western countries at different phases. In Britain, women got voting rights in 1928. In United States, women got voting rights in 1920. And in France, women got voting rights as late as 1944. Now let me give some details about gendered patterns of representation. To begin with, I would like to mention that women are underrepresented in political institutions. So we clearly find gendered patterns of representation in European parliaments. Gendered gap in women's representation is found in almost all European parliaments. Let me give you some comparative figures. Scandinavia, the women's representation stood to be highest at 38.2% in 2005, and the lowest was recorded in Eastern Europe with 15.7%. In other West European countries, the representation on an average of women was 22.7. So we find that gender representation was highest in the successful welfare state. As we all know that Scandinavian countries are also successful welfare state. And in welfare state, it has been possible to secure political rights for women far more faster than other countries. Also, we find gendered patterns of voting and party affiliation in Western societies. Let me give you some example. In France and Dutch countries, it has been found by the comparative analysis that women are mostly affiliated to left parties, whereas males are mostly affiliated to the right organization. In Spain, in contrast, they are closer to the right. In France, we find in recent times women have mostly supported left parties. In Britain, in comparison to France, Denmark, and Spain, both men and women have similar political attitude. In other words, we do not find gendered patterns of voting or party affiliation in Britain. Another very important point of difference between different countries is the difference in gender empowerment index. It has been found that Norway is the highest scorer in gender empowerment index, followed by Sweden and Finland. Students, we mark one thing, that all the three countries I just mentioned are also the most successful welfare state. So empirically, it shows that the countries which have been able to successfully implement welfare policies are also the ones which have been able to give equality or equal opportunities to women in all spheres of public life. Students, now we are going to learn about another very important area where the feminists have been making very strong claims, and these two areas are education and employment. The feminists all across the world, in different parts of the world, have made forceful demand for equal educational opportunities, which is very closely linked, which has been historically very closely linked with the social reform movements in Western countries, some of which are England, France, and Germany in the middle of 17th century. During this movement, we find that the feminists were very, very active in demanding for equal opportunities for women in the sphere of education. The feminists believe that women would be able to lead a life of dignity and self-respect only if they get education. They found that one of the basic reasons behind ignorance was lack of education amongst women, as a result of which they believe that it became very important for the governments to provide educational opportunities for women which were denied to them over centuries. The other important area which, according to feminists, would have given or would give a dignified and life to women was employment opportunities. Like education, the feminists observe that women are discriminated in the sphere of employment. In fact, majority of the agencies in both public and private sectors have been discriminating on the basis of gender. Majority of jobs in different spheres are done by men. Even if women undertake jobs in different agencies or in different sectors, they are paid, their pay is low, and they are made to perform low skilled or semi-skilled jobs. So the feminists felt that it becomes very important to give equal job opportunities to women in order to establish a society based on gender equality. In order to demand for equal employment opportunities, certain women's professional organizations in countries like Germany and Netherlands struggled for equal opportunities for women in public employment. These organizations made forceful claims before the government and the state to give equal opportunities for women in the public sphere, as they found that women lacked employment opportunities in both public and private sectors. Another area which I have been mentioning right from the beginning is where women are lacking are education and employment. Although feminist struggles have to a large extent been able to attain equal opportunities for women in these two spheres, much needs to be done. Let me mention some of the recent struggles that have been feminist struggles that have been centered around the demands for equal opportunities in the spheres of education and employment. And I would basically mention the case of United States here. In United States, strong claims were made by a feminist scholar, Betty Friedan, in the 1960s, a phase which also marks the second wave of feminism. In response to the demand of the feminist movement during this phase, President Kennedy constituted a Commission of Status of Women in 1963 to look into this matter and suggest alternatives for giving equal opportunities to women in matters of education and employment. In response to the report of this commission, government amended the Civil Rights Act of 1964 in 1972 that extended prohibition of sex-based discrimination in educational institutions. Sex-based discrimination in educational institutions is something that was very common in most of these states in United States of America. So this act was very significant in the sense that it checked the discrimination based on gender and sex in educational institutions. And this was a very, very important step in achieving the goal of equal opportunity for women in the sphere of education. In a similar manner, the government of United States, under pressure from the feminist movement during this phase, passed the Equal Pay Act in 1963 to prohibit sex-based discrimination in the matter of employment and pay. As I have mentioned earlier, women face discrimination in the sphere of employment. Those women who were employed in low-skilled or low-paid services. So in order to establish gender parity in employment, in the field of employment, this measure or this act was a very, very significant step taken by the government of United States. Now I would come to the last and the most contemporary issues linked with gender politics in Western societies. Feminist movement in recent times have made strong claims for sexual or reproductive rights. In US, in Roe versus Wade case, the issue of abortion right of women was raised. The Supreme Court's verdict was about protecting abortion rights was opposed by New Christian Rights. So we find that while on one hand the feminists claimed or made strong demands for protecting the sexual and reproductive rights of women, such demands were strongly opposed by the rightist organizations in United States. So the policies that were made with regard to these rights muddled through the claims for rights by the feminist groups and the opposition to these claims by the Christian right. The campaign against the sexual and reproductive right was primarily led by one of the prominent rightist organization of that time called Moral Majority. Moral Majority strongly opposed abortion rights and sexual liberation of women. The organization was highly critical of the claims made by the radical feminists because they believed that these rights or the claims made by the feminists would strongly violate the traditional laws of Christianity. During Reagan's regime, an attempt was made by the government to reinstate these traditional values, as a result of which the regime completely ignored the demand of sexual and reproductive rights made by the feminist activists. Students, now I'm going to summarize the important points that we discussed in this module on gender, the impact of modernity on gender. The first and one of the most salient points that we have discussed all throughout is that the modern welfare state has secured the rights of women. So those countries which were successful in establishing a modern welfare system were able to secure the rights of women. And the countries which have been most successful in this regards are the Scandinavian countries. So as compared to countries like UK and US, the Scandinavian countries have been more successful in granting gender equality or in establishing gender equality by giving or providing equal opportunities to women. Also, we find that in these societies, the gender representation, as I discussed earlier, is higher than those of US and UK. The second important point that we have discussed in this module is that the feminist movement, particularly the radical feminists, have raised new concern about sexual and reproductive rights. And this aspect is something that requires attention by government and policy makers all across the world. The third important point that I discussed was about that there have been different strands of feminist thought, but somehow they have not been able to achieve their aim and goal of establishing a society based on gender equality, primarily because they lack a collective vision and strategy. Because of difference in their views and the solutions they give to establish a society based on gender equality, they have not been able to come together. And because of this lack of collective vision, or what I would say a solidarity between different feminist scholars, it has been very difficult to achieve the aim of gender equality. The last point, which requires serious attention, particularly in the area of comparative politics, is that in most of the societies we found that gender identity has got mixed with other kinds of subordinate identities. And this is the phenomena which is very common in multicultural societies. For example, this has been a very important concern for particularly related with the rights of Black and Asian women in the West. So when we talk of rights of Black and Asian women, there is an amalgamation of two subordinate identities, the gender identity and the racial identity. Many scholars believe that the Black women, particularly in United States and some of the European countries, are triply burdened or triply discriminated. Number one, they face discrimination because of their gender identity. Number two, they face exploitation and discrimination because of their racial identity. And the third discrimination that they face is because of their class identity. So the Black women, especially in US, face triple discrimination. Thank you.